Hello everybody, my name is Deja and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going over all the books that I read in the month of June. If you guys hear any noise, it's because it's raining outside and I decided to open the window to kind of let in some ambiance. I don't know if y'all will be able to hear it or if it's annoying, so I'm sorry if it's annoying, but I thought, we could have some actual real ambiance. But as I said, we're going over all the books that I read in the month of June, and in June I read a little bit lower than I typically read. I average around 10 books a month. This is my lowest reading month so far, except April I also read the same amount of books, which is 7 books in a month. As I said, I generally read around 10, and in the summer I usually read like 15 to 20 books a month, so I'm kind of surprised that I read like less than half of that this month. But it was honestly a time of like new hobby discovery. I started to crochet in June, and I'm doing the Woobles kits. Like, that's what taught me to learn. I've tried to learn a variety of different ways, like online patterns, YouTube tutorials, other kits. I tried a whole bunch of different stuff over the past year and a half and was not able to learn. So I finally broke down and bought the Woobles kits, because last year in 2023 I said my goal was to learn how to crochet and I didn't learn. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna carry this over into 2024. I don't really set many goals for myself, like especially to learn a specific skill, but I did, and I carried it over, which means that I really want to do it. So I like broke down, bought the Woobles kits, and that's how I've been learning. And if you know anything about Woobles, there's video tutorials, so it's not something that I can easily like pop in an audiobook and do the video. Like, I'm starting to get to that point now after crocheting a couple things, but like at first I couldn't really do that, and obviously I was slow, so a lot of the time that I could have spent reading or listening to audiobooks was taken up by crocheting. And I've also been like walking a lot, and I'm not a huge fan of like listening to my audiobook and walking, because I'm walking inside, so I'm normally like doing work for my remote job, and I just prefer to watch things. Usually I do read with my Kindle stand sometimes there, but I prefer doing other things while walking that like has more visual stimulation for me personally. But anyways, regardless, we're going to be going over all the books that I read in June. Most of these were actually for reading vlogs that are coming out in July, so I will kind of spare some of my thoughts so you guys actually go watch those videos and can get not too much repetition. Hopefully it'll be okay and y'all will still like those vlogs, but unfortunately I hate editing and editing vlogs is really rough for me. Okay, it's really rough. First, of course, we're going to go over my statistics, so let me scoot over so we can pop them in. So in June, I said I read 7 books. 2 of those were by BIPOC authors, 2 of those had queer rep, and that accounted to 2,395 pages. I didn't have any rereads or DNFs. For genres, I read 3 horror books and 3 romance, and then 1 thriller. For format, I had 3 audiobooks, 1 ebook, and then 3 hybrid, which is a mixture of audio, usually with an ebook or a physical book. For audience, I had 5 adult books, 2 YA books. For ratings, I had 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 1 4-star, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5 stars. So this was a pretty good reading month, because 4 of the books that I read, over half of them were 4.5 or above, and the lowest rating I had this month was a 3-star. So that's pretty good. And then for type, I had 6 novels and then 1 short story / anthology collection. And then for author status, 3 of them were new to me, and then 4 were repeat authors. So we're just gonna hop straight in with the first book, and I always go from my lowest rated to my highest rated. So my lowest rated book this month was The Black Girl Survives, and this one is actually an anthology collection that is YA about black girls surviving different horror scenario situations. And this one I gave 3 stars because I liked a lot of the concepts and ideas, but I feel like on the execution it didn't really deliver, especially in the horror kind of element, because this is supposed to be a horror collection, and I feel like it wasn't really horrific. It didn't really deliver on the horror for me. A lot of the stories just didn't feel like that. Like, they just felt like we're following black girls, or they're like a little creepy or a little like sci-fi or paranormal or whatever they are, but not really like horrific or horror. And I feel like a lot of people might say like, this is YA, so of course the horror is going to be dialed back, but I've read some really good YA horror, and I've also read some really good anthology collections from authors that are in the horror genre for adults. So I don't know why this one didn't really deliver. In the reading vlog where I read this, which should be coming out right after this one, I do go over every single story, tell you a little bit what it's about, and then give my rating for each individual story if you're interested in seeing like my individual thoughts on like a specific author's story, because some of them I did like. I think my average rating for all the stories was actually 3.5, but overall the execution of the stories just felt like a 3-star to me, so that's what I went with, because that's what I felt in my soul. A lot of the things worked, but a lot of them also did not work. So just ended up being a 3-star rating for me. And there's not really a synopsis that I can give you for this because all the stories are completely different. There's about 15 different stories, so there's a lot of variety in the types of tropes that you get. I don't even want to say the types of horror because it didn't really feel like horror, but there's a lot of different variety in the types of stories that you are getting in this, and they did feel pretty cohesive. I will say that for it being from a variety of different authors, 15, it did feel very cohesive, which I appreciated. Then next up is my 3.5 star, which is another YA book, and that is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Caitlin Barron. I read this for a summer books reading vlog that should be coming out later this month, and this one follows a girl who works at this camp, but it's not really a camp. It's not like a place where people like stay during the summer overnight or anything like that. It's actually like a place kind of like, I don't know if you guys have like a Panic Point near you. We have this place called Panic Point near me, and it's like a horror experience where it's kind of like almost like a haunted house, but it's like a whole like field of different things to do, different like houses and stuff, like things are set up, corn mazes, stuff like that. So it's more of like that, like a horror experience, and this is actually based off a horror franchise that was created in this book that takes place at a camp. So that's why it's called a camp, because it takes place at a camp kind of setting, but most people don't stay there, just the staff, and then other people who are actually coming for the experience like do the experience and then usually leave. So she works at this camp. She really like is kind of like the manager, because the actual owner of the camp, who is the only adult, literally like doesn't pay any attention to them. Like he doesn't check on them that much. He doesn't like physically go up there. It's about to be like the end of the summer, so she and her co-workers are supposed to start closing down the camp, but 2 of them just mysteriously like are not there anymore. So they were like, dang, like they really didn't want to help us clean, and they just like ducked out on us. So she invites up some of her like friends, her girlfriends, stuff like that, to help her like close up the camp slash experience. And this is a slasher, if you didn't know, so there is killings that start to occur, and everything is not what it necessarily seems. This one was really fun. It was super fast paced. If you're looking for a fun, fast paced slasher, especially if you're not like super versed in the horror genre and so you are kind of like squeamish a little bit, I feel like this one would honestly be good for people who are kind of seasoned in horror. I think it's just like a fun story, but then also people who don't really read horror. I don't think this pushes too many boundaries that you're gonna be like really horrified or disgusted. Like I think it's good for everybody. It's just kind of like a fun, fast paced story. I really like the characters, and I think a strong point of the story was the characters. The ending kind of went in a different direction than I anticipated, and I simultaneously like it and don't like it at the same time, but overall I think this was a good story, so I gave it 3.5 stars. So my 4-star read was Just Like Mother by Anne Hetzel, and this was not one that I thought I would read anytime soon, but I'm really glad I did because it's been on my TBR for a while and I love the cover. I've had people comment that they really don't like this cover, but I like it, so sorry if it's triggering you. You can look away from the screen. But my mom actually chose this because I think for my TBR in June, I got like one of my spins said like a mom pick, so this is the book that she ended up picking. She hasn't read it before. My mom is a reader, but she just like saw the spine and the cover, and so she decided to go with this one. We follow our main character Maeve in this, I believe her name is, and Maeve grew up with her cousin in basically a cult that was very matriarchal, like it was ran by women, but they did grow up in this cult, so she was like saved from the cult. Her cousin was older than her, so I think her cousin was put into foster care while our main character was eventually adopted. So she's tried to basically create a normal life for herself. She lives in New York City, and then she begins to reconnect with her other cousin. So our main character Maeve lives a very single lifestyle, and her cousin Andrea, she is married. She is actually working in the fertility industry, so a lot of her friends she either works with or have babies, because that's how she got to know them, through the fertility kind of industry that she's in. So she starts to kind of bond more with her cousin Andrea, and they start to have a relationship. They even like go out of the city a little bit, but as they start to reconnect, things are not necessarily what they seem, and Maeve starts to experience some like flashbacks of things that she buried a long time ago. This goes in a direction that I was not anticipating, but that I really liked. Honestly, like this is like the best case scenario for where the book could have went. I really enjoyed where it went. I do think the ending was a little rushed and a little too fast paced to kind of explore like what was going on truly, and I do think we could have gotten more explanation for what actually happens in this book towards the end. Obviously I can't tell y'all what it is because it's a spoiler, but what happens towards the end half, like the whole thing, the whole story, like the point of the story, I feel like it could have been explored a lot more, and I wish that it was, because I kind of wanted more details, but what we did get I really liked. So 4 stars. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the plot. I just wish we got a little bit more information and explanation about what's going on in the end of the story. But the last little like epilogue chapter had me shook, shaken, and stirred. I love that last chapter. It was so good. If you're looking for a horror that is kind of like culty in a way, I would definitely recommend this one. Now we're going to be moving on to my 4.5 stars, and my first 4.5 star is Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. I was so happy to read this one, and honestly I might bump it up to a 5 star because I keep thinking about this book. In this one we follow our main character, Adriana, and she is a mother to this kid named Noah. Noah in there's a present timeline, so I think he's technically an adult in the present timeline, but in the past timeline he is a teenager, and he admits to being a pedophile. That's what he admits to his parents. He actually has done some actions based off this feeling that he has, and he ends up going to rehab and everything like that. Well, I don't know if it's called rehab, but it's a place to rehabilitate people who suffer with pedophilia. And so he goes there and then gets out, and he begins to live with his mother, but he basically feels like he is a pedophile. Like, no matter how much rehabilitation they try to do to him, like, that's just who he is, that's just his nature. And it's not like he wants to be that way. He really struggles in this book with grappling with the fact that this is who he is and that's not who he wants to be, and he knows that it's bad, he knows that it's not socially acceptable, he knows that it's not good, but it's just who he is. And I feel like this one is really a true story about how far a mother will go, not just for their child but for their child's happiness. And this story went in a completely different direction than I anticipated, and I loved it. Like, it was so emotional. This one is technically a thriller, like that's what it's marketed as the most, but I would say it's more like a kind of like thriller, family drama, literary fiction type of story. But I really love this one. It was so good. Like, I love the exploration, and it's really short. Like, I feel like the length of this was perfect. And Lucinda Berry, she is a trauma psychologist and a leading researcher in childhood trauma, so I really love all of her work that I've read so far, because I feel like she really explores how these impact your psychology, or how these different experiences impact you. And I feel like she really like took this topic and she knew what she was talking about, so it really created a very compelling but heartfelt story, because we are seeing a perspective that we never actually see in society. We're always just like, pedophile, bad, which obviously pedophilia is not good, but like sometimes in the case of Noah, he doesn't want to be this way and he's trying his best to fit in with society, but it's just how he is. And so I really enjoyed that exploration, and I think it was really interesting that we got to see a different perspective that we don't often see in society. So my second 4.5 star is actually the second book in the Part of Your World series by Abby Jimenez, and that is Yours Truly. This is my least favorite book in the series, but it's still a 4.5. Like, I would still rate the series overall a 5 star, but this one was my least favorite, but I still think it's like amazing, phenomenal romance. Just in comparison to the other two, it didn't really hit as much for me. But we follow Dr. Brianna Ortiz, and she is going through a divorce currently, but she's also really struggling because her brother, who is a bit younger than her, he is like having kidney issues and he needs to have a new kidney, and so they are looking for a donor, and they're kind of running out of time to find her brother a kidney. And so there's also a new doctor that comes to the place that she works, to the hospital, and she wants this promotion, but they're like, we're going to wait and give him some time to acclimate so we can accurately decide between the two of you who's going to get the promotion. So she's already annoyed with him. She already doesn't like him. She feels like he's just annoying, whatever, but then he writes her a letter and kind of apologizes for things that she may have taken in the wrong context, and it was a very sweet letter. So they start to like bond a little bit. They take like lunches together in like a little closet kind of thing. And then he secretly at first decides to donate his kidney to her brother. And she does eventually find out, and that's kind of where the relationship starts. I really enjoyed this one so much. Just this relationship, like them two, especially the man character, does not stand out to me as much as the other two, and I think that's what kind of drew me away from the story. Like, I think the plot is still amazing and I still like the characters, but compared to my attachment to the characters in the other two books, it just wasn't the same. Like, I really liked Brianna though. She is the best friend of the main character from Part of Your World, so I really liked seeing her story because we saw her in the first book. So was nice seeing her. But honestly, the other Dr. Jacob, he didn't really stand out to me besides the fact that he wrote this letter and he donated his kidney. Besides that, I couldn't really tell you any other personality traits about him, which is what kind of detracted that 5-star. I think he was still a good character, but I wish that we just got a little bit more development from him. I remember that I was listening to the audiobook of this while driving to my boyfriend's house at like 1 a.m. after I went and saw Megan Thee Stallion in concert, and I was like giggling, like kicking my feet in the car, like I was smiling. Like, this is still such a classic Abby Jimenez book, and I love her books so much. Like, they're so phenomenal. And so speaking of that, we're gonna move on to my 5 stars, and my first 5-star is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, which is the 3rd book in this series, the Part of Your World series. So this one I thought was super fun and interesting. So in this one, we follow our main character Emma, and Emma is a travel nurse. So she travels around. She actually had a really kind of traumatic childhood. She is not on good terms with her mother. Like, her mother has a lot of issues, so she went to foster care when she was younger, and that kind of caused her like this sense of not being able to settle down. Like, she doesn't want to attach herself to people or things because she knows that things can be very fleeting in life, just like her own mother was. So she doesn't really get attached to things, hence why she's a travel nurse. But she's actually a travel nurse with her best friend, who I think her best friend's parents actually adopted her after she was in foster care, or she stayed with them for a while. Like, I can't remember the details around that, but I know she stayed with her best friend's family for a while, and that's how they became best friends. And so our main character Emma has this curse where every person that she ends up dating, after they break up, they find like their soulmate, the person that they get married to. So she feels like she's cursed, and then one day on Reddit, she actually sees this "Am I the Asshole" post, which, if you don't know, there are these posts on Reddit normally called "Am I the Asshole," where people tell a story and ask if they were the asshole in the situation or if that somebody else was the asshole. And so there's this "Am I the Asshole" situation where basically this guy Justin explains that he went through the same thing, so he named his ugly dog after his best friend, because Justin was dating this girl and then they broke up, and then she started dating his best friend, and now they're like getting married or just got married or something. So he named his ugly dog that he got after his best friend because he basically stole his girl. And so he was asking if he was the asshole for doing that, but he said in this that like this is something that always happens to him, that he's basically cursed because every person that he dates basically finds their one right after they break up. So she finds this and they like connect over this curse, and she decides that her and her friend, they are going to travel to, I believe this takes place in Michigan or Minnesota, one of the M's, I can't remember, is one of those. I want to say Michigan, but I'm not sure. So it takes place at like this one hospital, all the books do. So these characters are not as connected as the other 2 books were, but these characters, she like begins to work at that hospital, which is a really famous hospital in this area. So she goes there so they can basically date each other and then break up, so then they will find their ones. That's their plan, is that hopefully they'll find the one after they like go on dates, and they even set like stipulations of like, we need to kiss, we need to go on this amount of dates, they need to last this long, and like they were setting out specific stipulations for their relationship to make sure that they would break this curse and they would find their one afterwards. Obviously, of course, they start to have a relationship, and Justin in this book, he also goes through this thing where basically like his mother has to go to like jail. He basically adopts his 3 younger siblings and is beginning to raise them, and I love children and books. Like, I love it, I love it, I love it. So I was really glad to see that in here, and I think that's why I connected to the story so much. And I loved like Emma's storyline with like reconnecting with her past and then trying to like come to terms with the fact that she can settle down, that she can place roots, and that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I really love that exploration of her character. I really love the exploration of his character. Like, I feel like they were so even, and we do get both the perspectives in this book, so I really enjoyed that. I just really love their story and them as a couple. I thought it was so good. And the title Just for the Summer comes in because they're supposed to date just for the summer, because her contract for the travel nursing in this state is for 6 weeks, so they're supposed to date just for the summer. It's so good. Like, I love this series. I don't have Part of Your World with me right now, it's downstairs, but this series is like my new favorite series. Part of Your World is my #1 book so far of the year. It's so good. So yeah, I love the series. And then the last book that I read for this month was A Novel Love Story by Ashley Pawson. I also gave this one 5 stars. It's my second favorite Ashley Pawson. The 7-Year Slip is still my first favorite, but this definitely comes in a close second. In this one, we follow our main character, and she goes basically on this like retreat with her friends every year to the area that their favorite book series takes place in. And so they're like a little reading group, and they are all across the country. So they meet up once a year in this cabin, and they have like a great time filled with wine and books and reading, and they just love it. Like, it's a little book club meetup. But this year, even her best friend that she literally is like right next door to, basically, like they live in the same city, she can't come, and nobody else can make it due to like surgeries, taking care of their mom, whatever. So she decides that she's gonna go by herself on this trip, and it's like a long drive to where she's going because they all try to like meet up at one central location, and they all like live in different areas. So it's like a long drive, and I believe it takes place in New York, like state. So while she's there, she almost like hits this man who's in the middle of the road as she's trying to like pull off because it's raining super hard, which is why she almost hits the man who's in the road. And then she basically finds out that she ends up in the town that their favorite book series takes place in. And the author who wrote this series actually passed away, so they never got a conclusion to the story or anything like that. So she is loving being in this town because it's reminding her of all of the books and like the nostalgia, and she is kind of grieving, but not in the same way of Ashley Poston's other books where they're like grieving a death, but it's more like grieving a relationship and like grieving the fact that your past self is never gonna be who you are now because of the things that you've gone through. So she feels like she can't really move on, and she's stuck, not because she's stuck like on that guy that she was with, but she just feels like it's hard for her to move on because they were literally about to get married and he called off the wedding. So that was like really traumatic for her, and so she is still going through that. So being in this town is kind of distracting her. She's not alone, and the guy that she almost hit is actually the bookshop owner, and he's not in the book. So she's like wondering who he is, and he's super grumpy, but he actually has the only place in town of that night that's open for her to stay because he has like a loft. So she does basically stay with him, and they start to obviously talk a little bit, but he's super grumpy and curmudgeon, which I love. I love a grumpy man because my boyfriend, he is a grumpy man, so I just love myself a little grumpy man. So I just loved him. Like, he was such a standout character in this book for me, and I did really like our main character as well. I thought like her exploration of like how books changed her life because she was able to escape into the leave a strawberry emoji on my next one. Bye everybody. You got the nerve to be on me, taking your life out of you. If you got my number, don't add me, cause baby, I'm a